And welcome in, everybody, to the College Hoop News podcast. As usual, I am your host, Tony Patelis. First weekly recap edition of the season. Very excited. As we did last year, every Sunday we're going to be talking with a guest and just kind of breaking down the week in college hoops. So we're about a week through now. We began on Tuesday, so a little less than a week here, but very excited to have a guest on tonight. Eric Fawcett from GatorCountry.com is going to join me in just a second here. Before we get started, I just wanted to first say Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there, and thank you for your service. Also, again, I just had to thank all my followers. College Hoop News cracked 10,000 followers this past week, so that was very exciting. Again, thanks to everybody for all the retweets, the likes, the views on Periscope and YouTube. Very nice feeling getting a lot of great feedback and everything for the page. So, Eric, how are you tonight, my friend?
I am doing really well, thank you. I live in Canada, as some of these listeners may know, or for those who don't know, I'm a Canadian, and today it's a Remembrance Day in Canada, so we observe the same kind of thing up north here, and a special day for that reason. And looking back, I think it was like 100 years since the war ended, I think, this year, which is crazy. But I'm super excited to be talking college hoops. It's our favorite time of the year, pretty much. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and you guys are probably familiar with Eric. He's been on the podcast numerous times. Again, he works for GatorCountry.com, covering Florida Gators hoops. Also a fantastic NBA draft prospect expert, in my opinion. We'll get into some draft stuff at the end of today's podcast. Also, apologies for last week. We were supposed to do a Big 12 preview with Eric, but unfortunately I was under the weather and we couldn't record. So glad to have him on tonight. So right out of the gate here, let's see what we got. So thoughts on the opening week, Eric. What were your thoughts on the week? What kind of stood out to you? Anything crazy?
I don't know. It's just like the thing about college basketball is you're just never going to have a bad week ever, it seems. And I love the fact that they kicked it off with the Champions Classic and having so many good basketball games on the first day of the year. It seems like we've already had some pretty good upsets. Just today, just before I was on with you, I was coaching basketball all day, so I didn't get to watch anything. But seeing the highlights of Florida Atlantic beating UCF at the buzzer, like that's awesome, and it had a little bit of March feel to it. So obviously, I think we're going to hit on some of the bigger games, but standouts. It just seems like there's going to be a lot of talk about obviously those maybe top four teams. But it seems like there's going to be a lot of intrigue from 5 to 25 and even beyond, and that's just why college basketball is the best sport in the world.
Yeah, before we break some teams and some games down, I wanted to ask you about the opening week or so of scheduling, because it looks like on Tuesday night we had a great set of games, a lot of excitement, and then we kind of hit a lull, and we have a lot of cupcake type matchups, and there's a few games sprinkled in there, and then it's like, so we have Tuesday night, and then we kind of get a lull until the early season tournaments start, the Gavitt games and all that. So do you think college basketball in any way can do a better job with scheduling early in the season?
I definitely think so. I mean, you look at the Tuesday games, and everyone's watching the Champions Classic, at least especially the casual fans. So, I mean, like, for example, like the team I cover, Florida's playing Florida State at 9 Eastern time. Unless you're a Florida State or Florida fan, you're probably not watching that game because it's on at the same time as the Champions Classic. And if I'm Florida and Florida State, I'm thinking, hey, this should be a pretty good game that even the casual fan, it turned out being a blowout, but hypothetically, it should be a really good game. Like, why not play that game on a Wednesday or on the Wednesday or the Thursday instead, just to give some more. So that's just kind of baffling to me. Like, if I'm a power conference team and I see that, and I'm playing another power conference team and I see that there's the Champions Classic on opening night of the season, why not schedule a game on the Wednesday or Thursday just to be kind of the marquee there? So I'm sure there's some kind of rhyme or reason behind it, but just looking at it, it's like, man, why not spread out some of these games? Because we can't watch 12 fantastic games that all have the same tip time on Tuesday. So it'd be great if they're spread out a little bit more.
Yeah, to me, it kind of feels like we get a little bit of a treat like that first night, and then the season to me really kind of gets going when all these early season tournaments start, like the Maui and all those great tournaments that we all love. So before we get into some games and stuff that stood out this week, who are some teams, Eric? Give me your first team that really impressed you a couple games into the season.
Well, I mean, the first one, and I kind of just alluded to it a bit, but I mean, watching Florida State absolutely dismantle the Gators was really incredible. And maybe I'll sound like a homer trying to say like, oh, Florida State's just that good, and that's why Florida lost. I mean, Florida was bad, there's no question, but you look at Florida State, an Elite Eight team that returns a lot of its pieces and just played the Gators without Phil Kofer, their leading returning scorer. And they were just so crisp offensively, which I am not super accustomed to seeing from Florida State teams, and are just incredible at pressuring the basketball on the perimeter. And if you threw the ball to the wing, they started denying every pass, one pass away. The way that they can switch if they need to, or just battle at all positions. Terrence Mann and Trent Forrest and PJ Savoy, they're just so versatile. And Christ Kamaji at the 7'4" protecting the rim. It's just, what you're going to get out of them defensively. And the way that they were able to execute offensively just makes them a really scary team that we probably should have seen this coming a little bit more, just seeing what they returned from a team that didn't have a great regular season last year, but really showed out in the tournament. I was going to say, did you have a chance to watch Florida State yet?
I did watch a little bit of that game, and it's just the first thing that just comes to mind is their depth. I mean, it's crazy. Leonard Hamilton just throws out 11, 12, 13 guys at you, and they're all athletic, and they all can switch, and they all can play multiple positions. They're not a team that possibly has like an All-American guy on the roster, or like a Player of the Year level guy. But I mean, there's a lot of good players from top to bottom. There's just not many holes, and I think if they're able to find a consistent point guard, which I think Trent Forrest is going to possibly be that guy for them, they're going to be pretty darn good. And again, they're doing, they played so well without Phil Kofer, but I think their depth really helps that out because they got so many other options. I think, Terrence Mann is a fantastic ACC player. And if some of these other guys like MJ Walker and PJ Savoy, as you mentioned, can get better and improve this season, they're going to be pretty dangerous. I think they can be definitely a top 5 team in the ACC.
Yeah, I think that as much as it's a lot of the basketball mind of a lot of us wants to look at teams that have the best execution or, a guard that has kind of like big play mentality. But I mean, the fact of the matter is I think that Florida State can out-athlete pretty much any team in the country. And
right.
That'll make for some interesting. And I mean, I'm just interested to even see the way that they match up with a Duke, who has some of the best athletes in the world. I'm not saying that Florida State's more athletic than Duke, but I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup in the ACC.
Yeah, me too. And Leonard Hamilton, you got to give him credit for getting that team last year to the Elite Eight, and that was not an easy run. They beat some really fantastic teams. They beat Xavier, they beat Gonzaga, so that was an excellent run, a very surprising run. So we'll see how it goes with the Noles. A team I wanted to talk about real quick, and we're going to stay in the ACC, is NC State. This is a team that I think could be one of the most explosive offensive teams in the country. I think they scored 95 in their first game and cracked 100 in their second game. Now, granted, it wasn't against strong competition, but this is a team that I think scored 80-plus last year. So I'm really excited about this club. Torin Dorn is just playing out of his mind right now. He's averaging 25 points a game, almost 10 rebounds. They bring in those 2 impact transfers and C.J. Bryce and Devon Daniels. They have Markel Johnson, who's one of the best point guards in the country. So they still have to get better defensively, but I think this is a team that could surprise in the ACC, and I think we're seeing it early on.
Well, yeah, one thing I think that's really smart about the way that they've kind of built their team is that I feel like maybe some of their teams in the last few years maybe have lacked an identity a little bit. And I feel like when you're in the ACC and you're playing in that league and you're not one of the big boys, you've really got to find some kind of team identity and just kind of roll with it. And to see that they've kind of said like, hey, we're maybe not going to have the athletes to grind out these teams defensively and to try to make this a low possession game. They kind of went the other way and said, hey, let's try to put up a lot of points. And like you said, maybe they probably need to get a little bit better defensively if they're going to really go far. But But hey, I mean, if you can score in the clutch, conference games always kind of have a way of kind of staying close. And if they've got enough players that can execute in the clutch and maybe a few more options that can execute offensively in the clutch than their opponents, we could find them winning some really interesting games that we maybe didn't expect before the season.
Yeah, their backcourt is fantastic, as I mentioned. Their front court is definitely a question mark. I don't know if they have a big that can really, shut down some of these really good bigs in the ACC. We're going to have to kind of wait and see. But I think they're going to run. I think they're going to play small, and I think they're just going to try to outscore everybody. But, hey, if they can get better defensively, I think they can be a pretty darn good team. Who's the other team you wanted to talk about, Eric, real quick?
I thought Iowa State was a team that I really enjoyed watching. And one thing that I thought was really interesting about their first two games is they didn't even really rely heavily on Lindell Wigington, a player that I kind of thought was going to do a whole lot for them. And I still think he will going forward. But just to see a bunch of their pieces really playing well. And I mean, I don't think Missouri's a great team, but they just destroyed Missouri. I thought controlled pretty much every facet of the game. And the way that I really enjoyed the play of Mariel Shayok, who CF people probably remember played at Virginia before transferring, and he was kind of he was a junior at Virginia and transferred to sit one and play one, which you don't see very often. But he's an incredible defender, as you know, because he was at Virginia, and he's been knocking down the three at a good clip. And I think we still see we're going to see some of those vintage kind of small lineups from Iowa State that really space it out and try to score. And they're going to be fun to watch. And I'm really excited to watch Lindell Wigington, and I'm really excited to watch Mariel Shayok. And they had a freshman that played really well that I'm blanking on. And that's a team that I've enjoyed.
Well, it's funny because Iowa State is, to me, one of the more intriguing teams in the Big 12. I think they can be an NCAA tournament team this year. But like right out of the gate, they're dealing with all these injuries, all these suspensions. Wigington only played one game so far because he's dealing with a heel injury. And you got Cam Lard, who's suspended, who was one of the better bigs in the Big 12 last year. So they're really shorthanded right now. And it's kind of coming right at a bad time because they're going into the Maui Invitational. And, and as loaded as that tournament is, they're going to need all the help they can get. So hopefully they can get Wigington back and at least, somewhat healthy so he can help out. But, yeah, definitely a versatile roster. I like their newcomers. You mentioned Shayok, also Michael Jacobson, who's a transfer from Nebraska. He's going to be an integral part in that front court, especially because Cam Lard is supposed to be out until December with a suspension. So that's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But definitely an intriguing team. I'm excited about the Cyclones as well. Yeah,
they're I think like you said too, it's their front court has a little bit of questions, but I always look at whose backcourts can win the backcourt matchup. And I think when you win the backcourt matchup, you're going to win a lot of games. And I look at some of the matchups they have in the Big 12, and I feel like they're going to be able to they kind of match up well a lot with I think at least match up really well with their kind of conference opponents, and obviously a really tough conference, but I think they're going to be able to find some wins just kind of on the strength of that backcourt.
Yeah, and the other team I wanted to mention real quick before we move on is LSU. LSU just has a tremendous group of young players. Naz Reid is somebody who we're going to talk about later when we get into some draft stuff. He's been absolutely fantastic. He's averaging 23 points and 7 rebounds, and he can step out and shoot the three, which is just incredible because you're talking about a guy, I think he's like 250 pounds, 6'9" or something like that. So he's been excellent. Everybody knows about Tremont Waters, one of the better point guards in the country. Javonte Smart is another local kid who's just fantastic. He's been playing well early on. So this is a team I'm really excited about. It's a pretty young team, but they beat a very, very good UNC Greensboro team the other night, an experienced team that was in the NCAA tournament last year, who almost beat Gonzaga early in that tournament. So I thought that was an impressive win. What do you feel about LSU, Eric?
Well, one thing I like about LSU is that I think they can win in a few different ways. I think a lot of teams in college basketball kind of need the game to go one way for them to win. But the thing about LSU now is with that really good front court is that they can play really fast with Tremont Waters kind of running the show, getting up and down. Those bigs can really get up and down, or they can win ugly because that front court is so athletic. And if they ever have games where they're shooting 32% from the field, they have a front court that can get every offensive rebound and keep plays alive and kind of win ugly. And that's what I think will be really good for them in the SEC slate is there's going to be times where I think they've kind of run some teams off the floor. And then there's going to be some times where they win ugly. And if you can win both a high tempo game and a low tempo game, I think you're really well suited to play in the NCAA tournament as well, because you see some giants fall when the game can't be played at the pace that they want the game to be played at. So when you can be versatile in pace, you can win games in a lot of ways.
That's a great point, Eric, because I talked to Cody Warsham from LSU Sports on the podcast last week, and he kind of said the same thing, that they can kind of beat you in a lot of different ways and play different styles. So that's an excellent point. So I think this team is super talented. I'm a little concerned about the experience factor because they're playing a lot of young guys, but the good news is those young guys are really, really good. So definitely excited about LSU. So, all right, let's talk about Duke real quick. Obviously, everybody is still talking about that tremendous performance against Kentucky on Tuesday night. They beat Kentucky 118-84. RJ Barrett, Zion Williamson, and Cam Reddish were fantastic in that game. Barrett had 33, Williamson had 28, and Reddish had 22. Now, what did you take away from that game? I know there's a lot to like, obviously. The thing that I was so impressed with is Zion Williamson because, you know, I'm not a big recruiting guy. I watch a little bit of tape and stuff like that, but, you know, all you see in the videos is him dunking. But he really showed he can shoot the ball. He's athletic. I mean, I just was extremely impressed with him. He played great today against Army as well. I think he had like 25 points and 16 rebounds. What was your biggest takeaway from the Duke win the other night?
About Zion, the biggest thing that kind of made it known to me watching him was the way he can pass the basketball. Yeah. I thought that was really impressive. The way he could handle the ball and pass it. Like, you're hearing some people throwing out some LeBron comparisons. And at first, I thought it was probably just based a little bit on his freakish kind of body athleticism. And though I don't think he's a LeBron level passer, because I think that might be LeBron's best skill. Zion Williamson can really pass the ball, which is just so valuable when you've got a guy that obviously can take that much attention. But Duke as a whole, the thing that kind of stuck out to me was how well all the pieces fit. Because when you look at just having that many highly ranked players, you think, hey, they're talented, but are the pieces going to fit? And for them, I really think it does. I'm not a huge recruiting guy, like you are, but watching Cam Reddish, I always thought I thought he was so apathetic every time I watched him play, and I just didn't think he had the dog in him. But the thing is, that kind of works perfectly when you're playing alongside RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson, because you can't have three guys that are just alpha dogs. So I thought that Cam Reddish actually just fit super well as a guy who actually, though his talent is through the roof, he's content to be a catch and shoot guy and punish teams when they leave him open. And Jones at point guard, I thought he was the perfect point guard for that group, who just wanted to push the ball quickly, move the ball around the perimeter, and then just completely give his all on defense. So I thought I was just kind of blown away with the fact that this didn't seem to be just like a ton of high level recruits that they're kind of making a way to play together. It seems like the pieces fit, and that is scary.
Yeah, definitely. They're not a deep team. We know that, and I think everybody's ready to hand them the national title after game one. And me very well. I'm somebody who is very, very patient, and I don't like to overreact to things. So I think, we have to be a little cautious. I mean, this is still a very young basketball team, but just a fantastic performance. I mean, I don't think you could have asked for more. And is this how it's going to be with this team this year? Is it just going to be those three guys scoring all the points, and everybody's going to kind of be left to the wayside here? I'm interested to see if any of these other young guys are going to step up for this team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see a team that can really play a good zone go up against them, or I'm curious to see a team that's
Syracuse maybe.
And a team like obviously Virginia, who I think is awesome, who will just slow down the pace and probably not give them as many transition opportunities. And I'm interested to see if Zion Williamson gets 2 quick offensive fouls and to see how we play there. So there's you can envision a lot of ways in which they lose basketball games. There's no question. And obviously being that young, you wonder if things don't go their way and it's suddenly a tie game with 3 minutes left, if they have the poise to make something happen and beat a more experienced team. So I mean, a lot of the discussions about them going undefeated, I mean, I don't think I'd ever
not in
bet
the
my money
ACC.
on any ACC team or going undefeated in any year. I don't think so. But hey, it's gonna be interesting to watch, and I'm interested to see how they go up against some teams that are going to play them differently than a Kentucky team that's probably going to just kind of largely trying to do the exact same thing they do.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about Kentucky next. Obviously, not a great start to the season, but this weekend they beat a really, really good Southern Illinois team, and I think the average college basketball fan will look at me and say, "What are you talking about?" But this Southern Illinois is a fantastic basketball team. They're a team that could win the Missouri Valley Conference. But so I thought it was a really nice bounce back. I think Kentucky's a very young basketball team, and it's just going to take some time to figure out their roles and who's supposed to do what. I mean, what do you think the issue is early on with this team?
Yeah, I'm just not sure they know who their best best lineups are yet. I don't know and I think that they have a lot more work to do in that capacity than, like I said, just how well Duke's pieces fit together. I'm not sure if Kentucky's going to be able to find a configuration that's quite as good, but they need to figure out one that's kind of better than what they had. They had these weird lineups where some of them were just some of them didn't seem to have any playmaking on the perimeter, any like enough guys that could really generate offense and initiate sets, and then some of the other ones were were just like maybe didn't have the defensive versatility that the previous lineup had, and it just seems like they just didn't have their lineups figured out quite yet. And hey, that takes time, and someone like you who's obviously patient really understands that some other people are like, oh, is Kentucky bad because they lost to Duke on night one of the season? No, I still think Kentucky's really good, and for their players to kind of just figure out roles and lineups, I still think they're going to be really good.
Right. Kentucky has like 10 5-star guys on their team. I think they're going to be fine.
yeah. I'm actually looking forward to seeing when they kind of fire on all cylinders and maybe make make it a little more interesting as to who the best team in college basketball is.
I think we're going to look back in, late January, early February. They're going to have 25 wins. They're going to be vying for the SEC title, and everybody's going to forget about that first game. So
I agree.
We'll see what happens. And then another team who played really well on Tuesday night, who kind of got, was kind of put to the wayside a little bit because of Duke's performance, was Kansas. They beat a really good Michigan State team. And the thing that kind of jumped out to me, Eric, with this team is the difference between the front court last year and the front court this year. Last year was pretty much Udoka Azubuike, a little bit of Mitch Lightfoot, and now you have Dedrick Lawson. You have Dedrick Lawson's brother, KJ. Azubuike was fantastic in that game. I mean, I think they have so much size up front, and as usual, they have a tremendous backcourt. That's what I thought. And the scary thing was that Lawson didn't really do much offensively till late in the game, and it didn't really matter. I mean, it was so impressive. What did you think about the Jayhawks' performance?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Michigan State was a kind of a perfect matchup for them because. So I'm actually not a huge. I still need to see it from Dedrick Lawson, which we can discuss my thought. But I thought that just Michigan State's front court that's good but not super athletic was a perfect matchup for Lawson, who's maybe not the most athletic, and I thought that they just dominated that matchup. I really like Dotson, the freshman point guard. Right. He was someone whose recruitment I followed really closely because Florida was in on him, and I thought he was awesome. And for them to be able to play two freshmen in the backcourt and that were just still so electric, and once again the athleticism difference even there between the backcourt of Michigan State. It actually, I mean, the whole game just kind of made me wonder if athleticism is going to be a little bit of a problem there for Michigan State. But yeah, Kansas. Once again, I really kind of I think they know who their best five are. I think they're going to be able to close games really effectively. I think that it'll be interesting to see if they play a little more old school Bill Self ball and play through their bigs, or whether they let that backcourt kind of run the show. And just a team that can score in a lot of different ways because of that. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's a particular matchup that could really pick on any of the flaws of Kansas. I don't see any kind of major flaws, and for that reason, I think they're really good.
Yeah, and they're so big up front. I mean, they had Lawson and Azubuike out there at the same time, and those are two guys that can go for a double-double any night, block 3 or 4 shots. So they're gonna have the teams are gonna have a lot of trouble scoring inside on this team.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the one thing is interesting is just because we don't see a lot of teams try to score in, down low in college basketball right now is their ability to kind of guard down low. Is a kind of a moot point just because there's not going to be a lot of teams that are trying to go in the post and score them on the inside. But if those guys can even can still continue to improve on moving their feet and being rim protectors on dribble penetration, yeah, they'll be a great defensive team, and we know they can score.
Right, right. All right. So, real quick, I just wanted to ask you your thoughts on the BYU situation. I guess they get put on probation here because of Nick Emery taking $12,000 worth of all types of stuff. I guess gifts and whatnot from boosters. I think the punishment was a little outrageous. I think they kind of made BYU as kind of an example where they're saying, oh, we're doing our job, we're punishing teams, while North Carolina gets away with all they were doing last year. Louisville gets away with what they were doing last year. So what are your thoughts on the BYU situation real quick?
Well, I don't often agree with Jay Bilas, or at least I don't all the time. But I thought he put it really well on Twitter, and so I'm recycling his take. He just said, like, this BYU situation just shows that you should, if you're a school that has any kind of violations or accusations, you should just deny it tooth and nail, no matter what evidence comes out. Because we saw BYU, they were the model kind of school athletic program for how they handled it. They kind of self-reported. They gave over all kinds of evidence. They could not have been more cooperative. And what does it give them? That vacates a ton of wins and puts them on probation, and they lose scholarships. And then you see all these other schools with, I would say, a lot worse things going on, because I should add too, because they were so open about the investigation at BYU, it came out that the school knew nothing about him getting these benefits and stuff. And so a lot of people would say that's not the school's, I don't know, problem to an extent. I obviously still think they should be held accountable in some form, but I think that there's a lot of worse things that go on from schools that just deny no matter what. And they haven't had to vacate any wins or anything. So I just thought Bilas said it really well, that even no matter how guilty you are or how bad the evidence looks, recent history has shown that you should just keep denying over and over again. And if you fight for long enough, they'll probably give up. And if you cooperate and do what you maybe should do, BYU was kind of a model. They did everything right. They did everything nobly, everything respectfully, and they had to vacate a bunch of games, get on probation, and lose scholarships. So I do think it's quite sad.
Yeah, I think it definitely has to do with what school it is as well, because we know North Carolina and Louisville and Duke and all these big time schools. These schools generate a lot of money for the NCAA, so they don't want these schools in trouble. They don't want these schools not playing postseason basketball. So I think they kind of made an example of BYU, because BYU is not a big time program in a way.
Oh yeah, that definitely plays a role too, and
Sure.
that is sad to see. And this is a totally different conversation, but I had a conversation on a different podcast, and this is a different issue. But the difference in the way that transfer waivers have been given out this season, and seeing what players have been instantly eligible and who have not gotten their waivers, has been and as it relates to the size of school involved, it kind of shows that. There's a few schools that seem, or the Power 5 schools seem to hold a whole lot of the power, and unfortunately, someone like BYU just is not a big player in the game. Unfortunately,
I would love the NCAA to come out and explain their waiver process, because it seems like they're just flipping a coin with some of these kids. I just don't understand it. I really don't.
No, I mean, you just see some of the kids, like, I don't know how some of their stories are any different than than a Braxton Key, who just played a whole lot of games for Alabama last year, and he's instantly eligible at Virginia. And to the extent of which I understand the waiver or the transfer rules, he should have to redshirt a year, and I just don't know how it could be interpreted any differently. But he's playing.
He's a perfect example. He didn't really have any serious issues of why he had to transfer. He didn't have family issues. He needed to be closer to home. He didn't have, so there's certainly things, that are good, examples of, you have a sick parent, or you want to be closer to home or something like that. But he just wanted to transfer. They gave him a waiver. And then Marcus Carr, who is at Pitt, he's at a horrible, dysfunctional program. He wants to transfer to Minnesota and play immediately, and they deny him. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I totally hijacked your question to this,
Oh, it's okay.
transfer thing, but I knew you'd have a good take on it, so I also wanted to hear it. But yeah, anyways, yeah, it just shows that there's not always rhyme and reason when it comes to these things.
All right. So let's get back to the court a little bit here. I think, one of the most exciting games of this past week was Buffalo upsetting West Virginia. CJ Massenberg just went crazy for the Bulls. I think he had 43 points in that game. I'm not super surprised that Buffalo beat West Virginia. They're a fantastic basketball team. We saw what they did last year to Arizona in the NCAA tournament. They're experienced, and I think they're a perfect match to kind of beat that press because they have a lot of ball handlers, and that's kind of the way you have to beat that press that West Virginia does. What do you think about that matchup, and how impressed were you with Massenberg?
Yeah, it was something. It was one of those games where I don't think any less of West Virginia because of it.
Me neither.
I just thought they're playing a team that played a great game, and I thought West Virginia actually looked pretty good. There wasn't anything that I was like that. Yeah, so I leave that game thinking like, man, Buffalo's a great team, and we knew they'd be good. Maybe they're even a little bit better than we thought. But just their way that they were able to beat the press kind of easily and almost take them out of the press. There's a few times where they got they got a defensive rebound or something. And it seemed like Virginia just was content to play half court pressure off misses and seemed to be only kind of getting into their press off a make or off of some kind of out of bounds. So I think that showed a whole lot of respect for them. And I even still thought I thought that the way that they executed in the half court was really good. They ran really, they're really patient. They're really confident with the ball. They just they didn't look phased whatsoever with the pressure and looked like a mature team.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, their three top guys are all seniors. They've been through a lot of big games. They're not going to be intimidated. On the West Virginia side, I mean, you have to remember this is a team that just lost Javon Carter, who was a 3 or 4 year starter, one of the best guards in college basketball. I think this West Virginia team is going to be really, really good. I think it's just going to take a little bit time to figure out that point guard spot, get some consistent play, and I think they'll be fine because they have Kanate in that front court, who's just a beast. I think they have maybe the best set of wing players in college basketball. I thought Lamont West was fantastic in the game on Saturday night, and I think James Beetle Bolden is one of the better scoring guards is going to be one of the better scoring guards in the Big 12. So I feel like it's going to take a little bit of time, but once they figure out the point guard spots, figure out who they like in that spot consistently, I think that's when you're going to see West Virginia really take off this year.
Yeah, and I even wonder if I really doubt this will happen, but I actually wonder if they dial back the pressure a little bit and play a little more straight up because you were talking about their wings and both offensively and defensively, I think they're great with Kanate kind of guarding the paint. I actually think if they decided they just wanted to play a half court man defense, they're going to be tough to score on. Like I actually wonder if they change their dynamic a little bit and maybe dial back the pressure a little bit. I still think that they're going to be a great defensive team. And even, in that game that they lost, I thought they were actually pretty crisp offensively and ran some good sets and looked good on that side of the floor. So I still think they're going to be really good. And don't let that upset make you think that West Virginia is anything less than a really good team.
Yeah, I mean their length on the perimeter too is really good. You have Lamont West, Asa Ahmad. I think Wesley Harris is a kid who's still learning, but he's got good size. So again, figure out the point guard spot, and I think they're going to be up in the top of the Big 12.
I definitely think so. I still, just looking at that league, I still think West Virginia is going to be up at the top of it. And I'm looking forward to, honestly, I watched that game and I thought to myself, I'm really looking forward to watching the next West Virginia game because I want to see what they come back with because, again, I still thought they were great to watch.
Yeah, me too. Me too, definitely. All right, so the other team, another team I wanted to ask you about is Auburn. And Auburn had a fantastic performance against a really, really good Washington team the other night. They really blew them out, and I think the game was over pretty quickly. And Auburn is just one of these teams, Eric, that they're just one of the most complete teams in the country. When I look at the most complete teams in the country, I think of Gonzaga, I think of Kansas, and I think of Auburn. I really do. I don't know if their talent level is as high as those other teams, but they have a fantastic point guard in Jared Harper. They have a deep front court that's really versatile. They have two rim protectors in Anthony McLemore and Horace Spencer. They have a guy like Chuma Okeke who can step out and shoot the three. He's really versatile. And then they have Austin Wiley, who's still coming back from an injury, but he's a guy that can really get in the paint and score the basketball. And then they have a wing guy like Bryce Brown and all these guys. I mean, it's like they're deep. There's just so much to like with this roster. What are your thoughts on the Tigers?
Yeah, I mean that game against Washington was so impressive, and part of me wonders if it was playing that early season game against Washington. I mean, I wonder if they had 3 months of looking at their zone from last year and were ready to go because they just weren't fazed by it. And having that point guard play where he's just could just pick apart defenses. I wasn't expecting that to be at this high of a level. And we saw from last year that even when they play undersized, they can they don't. It's weird. They play undersized, but you watch them play defense and you don't think that they play undersized because they still have a rim protector, even if he's 6'7", like you were alluding to. And the way that they can score, they can all get to different spots on the floor and score from different areas. And I do think they're for real.
Oh, me too. And I think, losing Mustafa Haran was obviously tough. But I think Chuma Okeke, who is a kid that I talked about a lot this offseason, I think he showed what he's capable of. Early this season, he's averaging 19 points a game, 10 rebounds. Again, he's a kid who can step out and shoot the three. He's already made 6 out of his first 8 3-pointers. So I'm just really excited about this kid. He can block shots as well. It's like you got Macklemore, Spencer, and Okeke in that front court that can just swat shots like crazy. I think this is another team that's going to be really difficult to score on in the post.
Oh yeah, and when you're smaller guys like that, they can be rim protectors as well. The thing is, it's not even as much of the Sagaba Kanate verticality, 2 hands up. Those guys are all guys that can really move their feet, so they get a lot of those shot blocks where they're rotating over and helping over and swatting a shot at the last second. And those kind of the blocks are the ones that really just like 2 certain points that are taken off the board. And when you can, they also they want to play fast. So those block shots that lead to runouts on the other side, those offense plays, those are just backbreakers for the other team. And I think that they're going to be able to really frustrate some teams that way.
Yeah, boy, Eric, when you look at the top of the SEC with Auburn and Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU, Mississippi State, I mean, what a league that's going to be this year. Just fantastic.
Yeah, and I even look at the bottom of the league. Like you look at some of the worst teams from last year, and you see hey, Arkansas has Daniel Gafford, and they looked really good the other night against Texas.
They surprised me.
And totally, and then you even see that the other kind of worst teams in the league from last year, you've got Vanderbilt that brings in 2 top 15 players, which is still crazy that Vanderbilt is doing that. And then you see Ole Miss and Georgia go through coaching changes and get 2 of the most sought after guys in Crean and then Kermit Davis. So just even the bottom of the league seems to be so strong. I think that's actually one of the strengths of the SEC is not only is the top of the league strong and the middle can probably contend with some of the the ACC and the Big 12, but I mean if you take the bottom, this is my dream tournament is if you took the worst 4 teams of every league and made them play a tournament. I think the SEC would do really strongly just in the strength of the bottom of the league, and I think that would be a hilarious tournament to play.
We've talked about it a lot on this preseason on the podcast where, generally, when you mention the best conferences in college basketball, you're always going to say the ACC or the Big 12. I think the SEC is starting to creep into that conversation. And I think it could actually surpass – I don't know if it's going to surpass the ACC, but I think the Big 12 is going to be slightly down this year overall. I think the SEC could creep into that second spot of, best conferences in the country. What do you think?
Well, yeah, like I said, I think if you were to take their best 4 teams and put them up against, the best 4 teams in the ACC, I don't think the SEC is as strong. But once again, I think if you were to take that second tier of teams and say, hey, 5 through 8 or 5 through 9, I think the SEC really contends with anyone. And then, like I said, if you take the bottom 4 teams, I think their bottom 4 teams are a whole lot stronger than the ACC's bottom 4 teams. And obviously the Big 12 doesn't have that many teams. But I think some of the bottom SEC teams would crush some of the bottom ACC teams. So depending. So it's a little bit of how do you define a good league? But if you want to make the depth argument, the SEC you could make an argument that they could be up there right as the strongest.
Awesome. All right. So before we get out of here tonight, Eric, as I mentioned, you're great with NBA draft stuff, with prospects and whatnot. So a couple of guys I wanted to ask you about, get your opinions on them. First guy up is Moses Brown from UCLA. This is a kid that I really watched. Actually, I watched a lot of tape on this offseason. I was really intrigued by him, and he's kind of shown right out of the gate what he's capable of. He's averaging 18 points a game, 13 and a half rebounds, 7'1" kid out of Queens, New York, playing for UCLA. What are your thoughts on Brown?
I think he's great. And I think the only thing that kind of makes me hesitant is just that the way that the NBA has been drafting and deploying lineups these last few years. I'm just not totally sure if how I feel about any kind of true centers draft stock these days. Just even in the way talking to some of the draft guys I know, or I listened to a podcast the other day with Jason Gavoni from ESPN now, one of the best draft guys. He was saying he only has 1 7-footer in his top 40. So it's just it's going to be a tough market. But for that reason, I mean, I think he might fall later in the draft just because some teams are going to think, oh, do I want to spend a higher lottery pick or something on him? And someone's going to get an elite big right there that could step in and be one of the best centers in the league. I think could really surprise some people. I think the Pac-12 is maybe a little bit light at that position. He's going to be able to just roll through it on a lot of nights and really showcase himself. And even the way that roster is constructed, I think is really set up well for him to be showcased. So I think he'll be in a lot of draft discussions for sure.
Yeah, I think he's his stock's gonna go up pretty high after the season's over. So another guy I wanted to ask you about, we mentioned earlier in the podcast, is Naz Reid, 6'10" kid, 250 pounds, playing for LSU. Again, just a really versatile kid. He can step out, knock down shots. What do you think about Naz Reid, NBA draft wise?
Yeah, his ability to shoot definitely makes him pretty well suited to the NBA game, or at least what they look for in NBA bigs. I think he's going to have to try to play kind of exclusively the center, work on his rim protection, but it'll be interesting to see a little more throughout the season if he's a guy who can switch out and maybe guard some guys on the perimeter when switch out on some screen and rolls, or when or even just if he can kind of like show and recover on pick and rolls. But that frame, that ability to shoot threes, just that there enough is enough for him to get drafted.
Oh, definitely. And then Naz Little from North Carolina. He might be my favorite prospect. Just a freak athlete, great defender. Can guard multiple spots. And he kind of showed late in his high school career that he can step out and knock down shots. He's doing pretty well so far. He's averaging 14 points a game, 5 rebounds. I think he's a top 5 pick level guy. What do you think about Little?
You know, I honestly think there's a whole lot of discussion between RJ Barrett and Zion Williamson for, who's going to be 1 and who's going to be 2. And I think Little could definitely get himself into the 2 conversation. I don't think he could get up to the point of being in the number 1 conversation. But I think there's going to be some teams that look at him at pick number 2 and say, hey, this could be our guy. You even look at the way that teams kind of fell in love with Josh Jackson in the draft a few years ago. I kind of see the same things about Naz Little, but I could see teams kind of falling in love with him even more than they fell in love with Josh Jackson. And for that reason, I think he's top 5. I would say, honestly, I think he's top 5 for sure. And could be really maybe most likely the 3rd pick, probably behind Barrett and Williamson. But I think there'll be some discussion of him going even 2nd.
All right. And then Romeo Langford in Indiana. He's a 6'6" guard. Fantastic player, kind of does it all. Great kid too. I've heard nothing but good things about him. What do you think about his draft situation right now?
Yeah, another lottery guy, and I think that if he decides he kind of wants to take on more ball handling duties and kind of brand himself as a guy who can play the point, that'll do even better for his draft stock because I think that this year is a weak draft for point guards, and there's always teams looking for point guards. And if he could even that could make his stock even higher. But I mean, hey, if you even see him as an off guard, he's got awesome size, electric offensively, and another guy that's in a perfect situation this year, I think, to really showcase his abilities. I think he'll run through that league and be really fun to watch and be a lottery pick.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the podcast tonight. But before I let Eric go, Eric, what are you kind of looking forward to this coming week? Anything in particular? I think the main tournament we're going to be watching is the Maui, obviously with so many great teams like Duke, Gonzaga, Auburn, even teams like Illinois who are on the up-and-coming, Iowa State team that you mentioned earlier. Anything else that you're looking forward to this week?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Maui. I'm looking forward to seeing how Gonzaga plays without Tilly. I think if they can kind of establish himself as a team that doesn't skip much of a beat without him, and then they obviously get him back later in this. Because the thing that could happen with Gonzaga is I think they might end up taking a loss or two, bad ones that kind of puts them out of people's radar. Then obviously they're going to go to conference play. The casual fan's going to forget they exist, and then it's going to come to the NCAA tournament time, and they're going to be like a 3 or a 4 or a 5 seed when really they have the talent of like a 2 seed, maybe even a 1 seed. And I think that people should put in their brackets accordingly. So I'm excited to see how they play. And I know you've been, I know you've been a big proponent. You've been a big supporter of Illinois, saying that they're a little bit better and I haven't had a chance to watch them play. So I'm looking forward to them.
You know, something frustrating regarding Gonzaga for me is, they have so many good players, so it's kind of easy to get somebody to get kind of pushed to the wayside. But Brandon Clark, the transfer from San Jose State, he could be their best player this year, and nobody talks about him. It's incredible. I mean, he's an absolute monster. I mean, he's going to put up 18 points a game. He's going to grab 10 boards. He's a great shot blocker, and that's why I'm kind of not so worried about losing Killian Tilly for a certain amount of time, because this kid is fantastic. And I get it. He played at San Jose State, didn't get a lot of attention, but you got to watch this kid this coming up week because he's just an excellent basketball player.
Yeah, I'll definitely be watching out for him because he also gives them kind of, when you have your stereotype of Gonzaga teams from the last few years or recent history, I mean, you don't think about them as having the athletes as some of the guys from other power conferences. And he's another guy that could really fill that void and match up with some of the more athletic guys of some of the other leagues. And I think that there's just the fact where he came from is probably some of the people are just like, oh, if he's that good, why did he end up there? But hey, he's at Gonzaga now, so I'm excited to watch him.
Hey, it happens sometimes. Kids get overlooked and they don't get the necessary recruiting level that they're supposed to be at. But I want to see him and Zion Williamson match up. That's going to be certainly, because he's got the same type of build. He's not as big as Zion, obviously, but same type of player. So I think that matchup could be fantastic.
Oh, if he even holds Williamson to like a decent game or something, it's going to be hilarious because there's going to be people that, was Zion overrated? There's going to be all the like hot take, quick reaction, but it's also going to be really good for a player like him who going from playing at San Jose State to, being a legitimate matchup with Zion Williamson a little bit later. Like that's a cool story. And those are kind of the stories that, kind of true college basketball fans love.
Oh, yeah, we'll be overreacting. I mean, people already have Kentucky finishing 10th in the SEC after the first week. So, but all right. Well, Eric, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. Again, guys, that's Eric Fawcett. You can find him on Twitter at efawcett7. And also check out his work at GatorCountry.com covering Florida Gators hoops. Eric, thanks so much for joining me tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, this was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, no problem. And we'll be back next week with another weekly recap. Michael Hunter from ACCBasketballReport.com will join me, and we'll break down this upcoming week in college basketball. It should be a great show because we're going to be talking about all the early season tournaments that'll be wrapping up right around next weekend. So thanks a lot. This is Tony Patelis from College Hoop News. We'll talk to you later.